Now, when it comes to Tasha K, things are about to get downright catastrophic. And let me be transparent with you before we take another step, because the Tasha K loyalists have officially crowned themselves the most insufferable, the most delusional, and the most aggressively dishonest defenders I have ever witnessed circling around a celebrity blogger, and they have this strange and almost cult-like fixation on silencing any honest commentary toward this woman by simply screeching louder, drowning these very comment sections with their endless stream of misinformation. Well, they finally pushed it. They forced my hand. They poked the wrong nerve. And I just have to say, if you have ever donated to that Unwine with Tasha K legal fund, if you have ever stitched a video defending her so-called journalism, since we are about to dig into some staggering revelations and devastating courtroom developments, they are absolutely not going to enjoy a single second of this one. And I am certain they are only going to spiral further into denial. So ride with me, drop a like, hit subscribe, and push this video as hard as you can. And I have never needed that boost more than at this exact moment. So with no more delay, let us walk into it together. As for Tasha K and this entire collapsing empire she built on the backs of other people's pain, and everything else this manipulative ringleader has been scrambling to do in her newest desperate chapter, well, in the middle of the smoke screen that the scheming couple of Tasha and her husband have been waving around any time the law gets too close for comfort, again, this is exactly what we are dealing with. Tasha pretending to be a broken little victim while quietly running a multi-million-dollar shell game behind closed doors, and then attempting to gaslight every single one of us into believing she is the one being persecuted. Well, I just have to remind you, this is exactly the kind of operation we are working against. This is why we need every single one of those likes. But when it comes to Tasha K and the entire whirlwind happening with this asset transfer scandal and with the smoke and the lies and the rehearsed sob stories they are pumping out to convince you that this woman is some misunderstood truth-teller getting bullied by a rapper, well, a massive chunk of that performance, inside all of the spiritual nonsense and praying hands posts she has thrown into the mix to make people believe anything about the idea that Tasha is innocent of anything beyond clout chasing, suing, and behaving like the textbook definition of a fraudster. Well, one of the favorite arguments her camp has tried to recycle is Exhibit A in the Book of Legal Deception. It is the claim that with the federal courts and all of the procedures where money trails are followed, they have insisted Tasha cooperated and complied and behaved like a model defendant. And they were assuring us that during this very stretch of the year, during this current Memorial Day window specifically, we were going to witness the redemption arc of Tasha K returning at the perfect moment. We were going to learn that Unwine is back and the queen of the blogosphere is reinstated as the people's voice and the gossip throne is reclaimed. This is the woman supposedly bringing balance back to the industry. Or that is what her camp swore to us last quarter when she tried to launch this rebrand tour that she conveniently wants every single one of us to memory hole right now. But that is not the focus. And what is the focus is that with this new lawsuit, with this new federal filing, how did that journey actually unfold? Well, we now have the receipts at the center of every single financial test that we have watched explode for Tasha K and her so-called innocence. At number one on this list, at the most damning location of them all, the place that Tasha K herself would have to admit to with her own admissions on her own platform. In no other venue than a quiet little estate tucked inside Georgia, which if you do not know what I am referring to, good. But it is the property Tasha has flexed about, lounged in often, and unraveled inside of within the privileged lifestyle she has cultivated for years. Well, inside this exact piece of real estate that Tasha spends more time scheming inside of than actually parenting her children, we got to see how the courts reacted to her little magic trick. Although, I am positive she wanted to bury these filings the same way she has tried to bury every accusation against her with the woman whose name now sits at the heart of this very case. Tasha is undeniably one of the biggest manipulators in this docket because of how aggressively she moved that house, the woman who has bragged about her properties, who pays the bills with hush money style ad reads, and who has even name-dropped specific celebrities on her show. With her newest paperwork landing across federal desks, which again, this is a filing built directly for a circumstance like this. This is the kind of evidence the courts thrive on. Well, I cannot show you the audio of those private meetings, but you can witness the documents stretched out in plain view, and they look like they could not be paid to act like this transfer was legitimate. Every signature is moving so suspiciously and so calculated. And this was to none other dollar figure than $0, the price tag that Sheikh conveniently agreed to and that any half-awake judge would flag as fraud on its face. I already see the angle there. They are truly that reckless to attempt any move for momentum in their crumbling empire, both of them. And while you might just say, well, this is one transfer, we cannot get a clean enough picture, or this is just one document, we do not know what else could have been happening behind the scenes, that is why it looks this sloppy. I thought about that. And you know what? This is not where it stops, because oh, do I have more for you. You loyalists are absolutely not going to like this. So please do not drop those little crown emojis underneath, because this was not just a one-time slip-up. But in another bombshell exhibit pulled from a packed evidentiary record where the legal team decided to surface that money trail and unveil the shell account paperwork, you know, I love this. You see it right here. We can see somehow it got even worse. Even more transfers surfaced. Even more handshakes were exposed, and even more accounts were uncovered. And specifically, you can see who was running point. There were a couple of accountants. And what were the lawyers doing? They were sprinting as far away from this paperwork as possible. Which so much for that narrative. That is another narrative that the more we see the receipts and the bank statements and the wire history out in public, that seems to get dismantled at least in this modern legal era. And you know, while based on the way that the Unwine staffers and the people who promote brand deals for Tasha were forcing this redemption story to be the next breakout headline from her camp, with all these scripted sympathy posts they were pushing into our feeds and pretty much whispering with them, guys, this woman is so misunderstood. She is so misunderstood, right? Go reshair her statement with your friends. You would have thought the asset transfer would have been quietly slipping past, satisfying middle-aged sycophants like the bottom-tier bloggers or the pay-for-play podcast hosts hunting for the scoop they have been begging for. But clearly we can see this lawsuit is moving in the open and all that is happening is that the fortress is dissolving. And I would say if there was any chance for the Unwine damage control and the rebrand programming to actually land and to get some of these courts to not straight up issue sanctions hearing a defense that sounds like it was designed to be performed over a kindergarten rhyme beat. Shout out to the legal analysts dragging this on every platform. These attorneys are sharp. They have been crushing it with these document breakdowns. And whether they are placing the better arguments on better contextual evidence and showing how Tasha just folded on a lot of them or they are doing the opposite, they are showing how embarrassing Tasha's depositions are by stripping them bare with the calm precision of trained litigators and putting it on something like a courthouse PowerPoint deck. We are seeing how much of a circus act this entire defense really is. And again, how much of a hustle is being run for people to believe otherwise, or for people to believe that this is something better than a slow-motion bankruptcy at the most extreme level. And from something like that to the viral courtroom clip of this man reacting to Tasha's claim of being broke, which is hands down the most hilarious legal reaction footage in the history of celebrity lawsuits, I would go as far as to say that because seriously, with this clip, every time I see it on my feed, and every time I see it on my timeline, it keeps growing, gaining more views. It hit around 15 million the last time I scrolled past it, and I keep laughing harder and harder each time. Well, I do think that with the unfiltered legal takes, it has done a lot of negative PR for the rebrand PR plan that was carefully designed to soften and rehabilitate Tasha K. And it has already neutralized a lot of that programming that was being pumped into the bandwagons and the easily flipped and short attention span followers. And with all of this, I am not just claiming that Tasha's victim arc clearly is not landing when you are actually getting through to people who are interpreting evidence with their own brains and not with unwind talking points in their head. But I am also saying that when you see the way this paperwork is moving inside the courts, well, I am not even going to say anything else. I am actually just going to show you. I want every single one of you to think about that, what is being shown to you and what is being narrated to you, because I have a little tip for you. If everything is being narrated to you, it is probably not real. Well, I just want to walk you through two different filings that seem to be the cleanest snapshot of the moment we are watching and what is happening. Which is going to demonstrate to you that while Tasha is sinking her own case with her own filings and never appearing more guilty, or at the very least we can 100% and definitively confirm that this house transfer maneuver is not landing with the judge. You remember that original $3.8 million judgment that a lot of these loyalists are trying to act like was some kind of overhyped paper victory by Cardi B. I saw somebody compare it to a glorified parking ticket, which is just showing me that a lot of you guys must be eating well. Tasha must be sending DoorDash and Cheesecake Factory deliveries to every single defender she has left. Well, this is what it looked like when Cardi B actually walked out of that Atlanta federal courtroom and judgments like that defamation ruling were being celebrated across every legal podcast and breakdown channel, exactly like Cardi B told us would happen. Do you see it? Well, one woman built her empire on lies that crumble under oath, the other built her career on truth that holds up in court. And you know, with these massive moments where we are watching Tasha's new defense maneuver collapse during the verification process and the explanations are getting more and more rehearsed and people like her husband and all of the other accountants flying in to vouch for Unwine Tasha are running interference on what this asset transfer means and how everything in entertainment law as a whole is moving and for the worse because Tasha is now at the center of a federal fraud examination. Yet again, back to my point about showing and telling. They are telling us this, but what are we genuinely seeing and what are we being shown? Well, the point I am trying to make is that while her husband and all of Tasha's other shields and loyalists who trade their reputation for a piece of the Unwine podcast slot or whatever other perks being affiliated with this woman and the bottom feeders of her network brings. When Cardi B dropped that judgment hammer and when plaintiffs win genuinely strong cases that reshape the blogger economy, get the lawyers talking, and shift the entire culture around defamation, it just simply does it. We see people read the rulings. We see the case cited everywhere and we see it referenced in different courts like this. And we do not see these manufactured PR campaigns ramming sympathy statements straight down our throats while at the same time having the biggest gossip blogs in the industry feed off of Tasha's literal table scraps and then tell us that she is back and that everything else that has gone down in this defamation era is over and that everything that ruled against Tasha is gone. Well, again, we are not seeing any genuine proof of that. I just have to say there is something so corporate, manufactured, and performative about everything we are seeing that is pro-Tasha right now. And I know some illiterate Tasha loyalist is going to say, well, how are you calling the Tasha camp manufactured when Cardi B had teams like top legal firms behind her and giving her an army of lawyers? But you are missing the point. A federal courtroom is a stage that is operated by the United States government and demands hard, admissible evidence. But you only get a judgment that large from genuine, documented damages. But I mean, the results of that civil judgment, the case is louder than most celebrity defamation cases all the way back in the early 2000s and the Depp Heard saga from a few years ago. It is reflected exactly why Cardi was awarded what she was. The woman is provable. Do not try to be slippery here. Just pay attention to the actual message because when that judgment dropped, the conversation was about Cardi and everything was organic. Everything was earned and an actual extension of the evidence and just with all of this material around Tasha and how off it feels. While you could argue we are not seeing any actual proof of the deception in the Unwine rebrand, I do kind of want to push back on it the more I sit with it, because there is a glaringly obvious crack in the way everything has played out and with the way that people on different sides, but especially the Tasha side are framing the entire thing. And it is undeniable. Multiple Tasha defenders or people who promote this woman or bloggers who made career-ending mistakes and now pledge everything to her brand. Well, we are seeing that they are committed to Tasha. And if your job is to report on celebrity news in any honest capacity, think about somebody like a so-called industry doctor with a fabricated diploma. She is labeled the #1 healing voice in entertainment, and she refers to herself as that and loves to call herself credentialed. For this woman to walk on stage with Tasha, be a part of her redemption episode rollout, and then flash an honorary doctorate framed like an Ivy League degree. The woman had a photo op and pretty much got a stamp or a credential that signals she is officially part of Tasha's protective wall. You know, the standards in entertainment media are so far in the dirt and honestly, so many people are illiterate in all different sectors of this industry. I am not even just talking about on the Tasha side of things that they will sit here and discuss pretty much inadvertently irrelevant talking points and not address the glaring issue with the fact that Tasha is parading around a fake doctor and pretty much confirming that somebody like this Cheyenne figure is on her team. Again, if Cheyenne came out and admitted I am compromised, I am promoting Tasha, it is a slightly different story. But for this woman to be called the #1 healing expert in entertainment, for brands like daytime talk shows to elevate that label and for other personalities to validate it as well, to do something like this, I mean, just to compare it to the medical world for a second, there is a reason why when doctors and patients or therapists and clients, we have seen that in the licensing world recently, get anywhere near each other outside of treatment, it is an immediate breach of your professional ethics. It is an immediate conflict of interest. And I know this Cheyenne person is a self-branded coach, but there are still consequences for it. Even the fact that nobody has thought about this in entertainment media and had any meaningful conversation in terms of the gatekeepers or the people on Tasha's side are still trying to act like we are the biased ones or we are the ones who are clearly compromised. It is genuinely insane because if a real medical doctor ever took a stage with a defendant under federal sanctions and wore a Tasha K medallion, that doctor would literally lose her license. It is just insane how different the standards are. And I honestly just say all of that to say and really want to highlight it because understand how manufactured this entire rehabilitation campaign is. The Unwine brand is not the thing hyping up the Unwine rebrand to the level it is, but it is all of the noise surrounding it from these compromised people that Tasha has recruited to pretty much be her super team of defenders that are posing as cultural commentators. And these moments we are seeing of Tasha imploding in federal court is what is showing us the reality. This moment is capturing it in its full capacity. While they are going to tell us blogging is saved and celebrity journalism is back and the people have chosen a new queen of gossip. Well, if the federal docket looks like this, and a routine compliance hearing looks like this, and for the lower-tier bloggers and the pay-for-play personalities of the world who tried to circle their wagons all year and create this almost sob story of how the gossip game felt so empty because of the Cardi B versus Tasha K war ever since Cardi changed everything and put Tasha out of rotation and forced her into some sort of legal hiding. Well, we should all feel terrible and once Tasha would return, everything would be fixed. So, see Tasha now when she has fresh sanctions filed and this is what they are doing in the courtrooms. This is what they are doing when they are subpoenaed in public. And we have seen other brand new judgments from other plaintiffs in comparison to it that have shaped and influenced the legal landscape in real time just like we are watching with this filing of Cardi's federal claim right here. Well, somebody is lying and they have got to explain themselves because you know when it comes to how unbearable all these Tasha defenders are getting and why they are continuously behaving like this. I think what we are seeing inside the courthouse is the reason why. And what I mean by that is that I think the worst thing that happened with this whole asset transfer scheme, and I think this is going to end up being my take on the entire saga and how it is going to end up playing out for a long time from here on out, is that for Tasha, she ran a maneuver that is not as obviously criminal or undeniable as a straightforward bank fraud charge. So right now, compared to where she was at in her original defamation trial, the Tasha loyalists do not have to retreat in full or just stay in their little echo chamber because they know they cannot compete with anything. But at the same time, this transfer move is so amateur, it is so transparently desperate, or at the same time, its power comes from the delusional, deceitful, evasion that Tasha is putting out there that it requires followers and it is pushing followers to be more delusional than ever. If you are a Tasha loyalist and if you want this woman to be the queen of gossip, you are going to convince yourself that this house transfer that is obviously fraudulent is somehow innocent and it is perfectly legal. And then you are trying to act like this scheme is having the same effects on entertainment journalism that the shift that Cardi B started and achieved with her own courtroom victory and from this federal escalation ended up amounting to altogether, which again it is not enough. Stop trying to do that. And that is the thing I think a lot of people did not realize but everyone needs to be aware of it going forward because they are lying to us and they are trying to pull this con right in our faces. But the goal so clearly with Tasha and everything she is doing right now from the top down from her own statements to all of the other defenders to the followers, it is to try and create this sort of experiment where everybody is going to be convinced once again just like they were for years and years pretty much from her early Unwine episodes that she was so much more credible than she ever was and ever will be. And they are going to try to gaslight as many people as possible into believing those same tired talking points that got her to the position she was sitting in for that entire decade. And people like Cheyenne need to push this hard because if this fake doctor was not doing this, briefing all the other shaky Unwine apologists and the rest of them were not deploying whatever other lies and tears they use time and time again to try and get by and to try and rescue Tasha. Well, these filings and these federal failures would be all the conversation around the Unwine empire. And these failures and these moments of just seeing how the rebrand is engineered, it would be out there and that is just it. That is the problem. That is the strategy. Remember it. Book it. Mark it down. And you will only see it confirmed more and more clearly as the months pass because the Unwine redemption is a fabrication. It is a sham. It is a hustle. It is here to mislead you. And that is why we are at the point we are at. Everyone needs to look at this and document it and make sure they do not forget it because it is only going to become more important, especially going into this week. Brace yourself. Because as Tasha and everyone around her tries to pull off a collective heist and almost psychosis exercise on our collective memory and rational instincts as observers, as they want us to scroll past a federal lawsuit like the Cardi filing and suddenly think it is a minor inconvenience, do not fall for it because it is all baked into the playbook. But unfortunately with this playbook that wants us to embrace deception, crown it actually, and use it to displace and disrespect decades of journalistic integrity and the current standard of legitimate reporting. The worst part about all of this is that it is only going to get significantly more disturbing. The attempts to try and rescue and really lift up Tasha are only going to get more aggressive. The way they frame everything from the world of celebrity journalism to people who actually respect the craft's values to the double standards they try to construct to help their wounded queen. And with everything they are going to deploy against Cardi B, it is all going to get so much worse. It is all going to get so much more insufferable. And you need to be ready for that. The one thing that Tasha and her team handle very well, and I have to give her credit for it, well, is that they understand how easily public sentiment can be swayed, and I think that is precisely why the original defamation case and everything in that window really just dismantled Tasha. Because if we look at the testimony and we compare the credibility, I think we can all understand that Tasha moved very arrogantly and that while Cardi delivered some of the most composed witness performances of all time and some of the cleanest courtroom moves of all time, Tasha really was overconfident. She was cocky. She thought that about a 7 out of 10 of half-truths was going to win when the stakes were a 10 out of 10 of documented evidence. And she was stunned when that did not work. Why is that? Because Tasha has been winning over the last decade of her career since Unwine started its rise. I think that was the turning point of an entire hustle. And I know while people will try to defend that, and even now thinking back to a chapter and an era like early Unwine, it is looked back on in a lot kinder of a light than when it was actively airing because of how aggressively reckless Tasha episodes after that have become. I kind of think that is an effect with a lot of grift turners in media. I think you could observe that with multiple different franchises, whether it is like the mediocre influencer podcasts from the late 2010s, the recycled gossip shows of the early streaming era, or even like the daytime talk circuit for example, you just see the bar get lower and lower and then you go back to something older like a vintage Unwine episode and think you treated it too harshly. Although for the standard at the time, it also was a defamation lawsuit waiting to happen. Well, I say all of that to say this comeback for Tasha, it is not about the journalism. It is not about winning people back over with honest reporting. It is about producing content that is borderline enough and that lands back on that level of mediocrity where people that have low standards and that hate a Cardi B or hate the state of celebrity accountability like it, but then you can gaslight more people into supporting it, becoming subscribers, and becoming defenders. And again, the psychosis that Tasha is going to try to run is ultimately going to do more for her than the actual reporting ever would. This is why people like Cheyenne are more critical than ever. And this is why Tasha is treating them as such, and that is because she knows her career relies on it. And so when you just see the way entertainment media is moving, how strange this is all getting, but how this is going to be the standard. This is what we are going to have to deal with. And this is what we are only going to see more and more of. And honestly, I will say I think the only time this is ever going to end is when a new accountable platform in celebrity media rises up. Otherwise, I think Tasha is going to continue with the Saturday morning cartoon villain antics to try and salvage her career. Well, I know for some people they may not want to hear this, but I do not think we have ever witnessed anything quite like this because of how unique the platform of the situation is and just the way the digital media world moves as a whole right now. But despite the original judgment being awarded 2 years ago, with everything we are watching with the narratives, the maneuvering, the rebrand, the new content, and just the ability to try and force people to try and accept defenses like the husband asset transfer, the Cardi B and Tasha K war is just starting because for Tasha, she is not just leaving it to the courts and letting the jury vote with their evidence, their verdicts, and even just their honest interpretation of testimony, I guess. You could say. But she has to go too far. She has to manipulate the docket. She has to dodge the wires. She has to fabricate the paperwork. She has to push everything more and more to try and give this overwhelming impression that she is the survivor because she knows she cannot stand on her own. Tasha knows that she did not build a defense that is at anywhere near the level of integrity as Cardi's case. And the only way that she can try to make it look like it is as well if she chops up that case file, uses snippets of Cardi doing some emotional reaction or some sort of an outburst before walking into a deposition or getting into the core of the testimony and to try and frame that as people's reference point for that lawsuit. It is all a game. It is all lies and it is all jokes. And from here on out, everybody needs to be aware of it. It is more important than ever. And with all of this, what everyone needs to understand, the deception and the deflection is coming. So get ready for it and understand what is happening because all together with this material and with what they are trying to do with it, they want to deceive you. And when you do not accept this lazy mediocrity and the deflection that comes with it, Tasha does not just lose, but entertainment journalism and the truth wins. But before we even get there, let me drag you deeper into the second wildfire ripping through the entire situation, because if you thought the asset transfer was the worst of it, get comfortable, because the second scandal is somehow even uglier. Enter Chef Mila. Now, Chef Mila is not some random extra in this story. She is the celebrity chef that has cooked private dinners inside some of the most guarded mansions in the league, and she has been a quiet observer of conversations that most journalists would sell their soul to hear. And the moment she clicked send on that wall of screenshots, the entire room shifted. Because what she leaked was not just gossip. It was not just messy texts. It was a full receipt-by-receipt breakdown of an alleged scheme involving Cardi B's own hair braider, Cheyenne, and the looming Stefon Diggs trial that has been hovering over this circle like a storm cloud nobody wants to name out loud. And the moment Chef Mila lit that match, everybody in the comments who was pretending to be neutral suddenly had to pick a lane. So let me walk you through this slowly, because this part right here is where the entire situation flips from celebrity drama into potential federal exposure. According to Chef Mila, Cheyenne was allegedly paid, and I want you to hear that word again, allegedly paid, to take the stand and deliver testimony that did not align with what actually happened behind closed doors. That is not a he said she said spat. That is not a friendship falling apart over a hairstyle. That is the literal definition of perjury wrapped inside a celebrity bow. And the texts that Chef Mila dropped, the timestamps line up too perfectly. The names mentioned line up too neatly. And the dollar figures whispered across those messages are too specific to be casual venting. So when Tasha's defenders try to brush this off as another loud black women fighting on the internet, what they are really doing is burying a story that has the potential to send people into a witness tampering investigation. And do not let anyone tell you that is a stretch, because federal prosecutors have built entire cases on far less than what Chef Mila just casually dumped onto a Friday night timeline. And this is where the architecture of the entire scandal starts to mirror what we saw with Tasha. Because if you are paying attention, you can already see the same playbook at work. Deny the receipts. Smear the messenger. Flood the algorithm with sympathy posts. Get a friendly podcast to invite the accused on for a tear-filled interview. Frame the leak as malicious and the leaker as bitter. And by the time the actual evidence reaches the public, the narrative has already been rewritten 3 times over. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. And that strategy is being deployed in real time right in front of our eyes, and most of the internet is too distracted chasing the next viral clip to even notice. But I am going to make you notice. Because Cheyenne being dragged into this is not a minor footnote. This is a woman who sits inside the rooms where the most powerful women in entertainment let their guard down. She hears the off-the-record conversations. She watches the body language. She knows which relationships are real and which ones are performances staged for the cameras. So when a chef of Mila's stature publicly accuses her of accepting payment to lie under oath, this is not a feud. This is a credibility execution. And the ripple effects are going to reach Stefon Diggs, his legal team, his publicist, and every single brand sponsor that has been quietly holding their breath waiting for this trial to conclude. Because if even one juror in that case caught wind of these leaked texts before deliberation, that is grounds for a mistrial. That is grounds for an appeal. That is grounds for everything those legal teams have been building behind the scenes to come crashing down in a single afternoon. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Stefon Diggs is not the only athlete whose name gets pulled into the gravity of this leak. There are at least 3 other recognizable names that have been quietly floating in the background of these conversations, and the moment those names get attached to court documents, the dominoes do not just fall. They detonate. So when you see Tasha K's circle conveniently pivoting at this exact moment to a fake doctorate scandal and a rebrand tour, you have to ask yourself why the timing lines up so perfectly. Because in the gossip industrial complex, distraction is currency. And right now, somebody is spending a fortune trying to make sure your eyes stay anywhere except on those Chef Mila screenshots. So let us follow the money, because the money always tells the truth even when the people refuse to. The so-called doctor I mentioned earlier, this Cheyenne figure being paraded across daytime panels and Instagram reels with a doctorate that looks impressive on a graphic but evaporates the second you run it through any accredited database, well, that is not a coincidence either. That is a calculated piece of armor. Because the second you can call yourself a doctor in public, you can sue for defamation when somebody questions your credentials. You can hide behind professional privilege when the receipts get too close. You can position yourself as a healer in a community that has been historically failed by legitimate healers, and you can monetize that trust in ways that would make a licensed psychologist file a complaint with the state board. And the institution handing out these so-called honorary degrees, well, it has been quietly issuing the same paper to a parade of celebrities, names you would recognize, names you have streamed, names you have laughed with on late-night television. And every single one of those names is now walking around with a title that gives them legal cover and brand legitimacy without ever opening a textbook. That is not education. That is laundering. That is laundering reputation through academia the same way Tasha allegedly laundered her assets through her husband. The pattern is identical. The mechanism is identical. The only thing that changes is the product being sold. And when you stack those two scandals next to each other, the asset transfer on one side and the fake credentials on the other, you start to realize you are not looking at two separate stories. You are looking at one ecosystem. One closed loop of mutual protection where the bloggers vouch for the coaches vouch for the clients vouch for the bloggers, and nobody inside that circle ever has to face a fact checker who is not already on the payroll. And the audience, meaning you, meaning us, we are the product being sold to advertisers, to platforms, to networks, while the people inside the circle pass the same lies between each other like a relay baton. That is the real story. That is the story Tasha does not want you connecting. That is the story Chef Mila just kicked the door open on whether she fully realized it or not. And the question now becomes, does Cardi B leverage this second scandal inside her existing federal action? Because legally, she absolutely can. If those Chef Mila texts demonstrate a pattern of paid testimony or manipulated narratives inside Tasha's broader network, that is admissible context. That is evidence of a coordinated campaign rather than an isolated bad actor. And when a federal judge sees coordinated conduct, the sanctions multiply. The penalties multiply. The criminal referrals start landing on prosecutors' desks instead of just civil dockets. So Cardi is not just hunting down a $3.8 million judgment anymore. Cardi is now sitting on the receipts to potentially unravel an entire content economy that has been profiting off of defamation for nearly a decade. And that is why this week matters so much. That is why the next 48 hours are going to be louder than the last 48 months. Because every single piece is now on the board. The asset transfer is documented. The fake degree is documented. The leaked texts are documented. The witness tampering allegations are documented. And the only thing left to determine is which domino falls first and how many of these so-called influencers get buried underneath it when it does. So pay attention. Take notes. Screenshot the timeline. Because by the time the mainstream outlets finally catch up to what is actually happening here, the verdict will already be written, and the people who were laughing at Cardi's lawsuit 2 years ago will be the same people pretending they always saw this coming. Now, with all that said, let me know in the comments what your read is on this entire mess. This whole situation is just such a strange and revealing thing. And I love to see how Tasha is just collapsing under the weight of her own paperwork and having her so-called credibility evaporate in real time the way she always insisted it never would. And well, if you are excited to see where every single thread of this is going to lead from here, just be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and push this video as far as you can. You are amazing, and it helps me out more than you can imagine. I cannot thank you enough for the support, especially at this exact moment. Something genuinely bizarre is unfolding both from the direction of Tasha and what her camp is plotting on the rebrand side, but also on the PR front as well with people like Cheyenne and the other operators in her circle. It is getting genuinely strange the way the language and the rhetoric are shifting. But we will leave that there for now. I am certain we are going to have to revisit it. But in the meantime, if you want to see how the possibility of a brand new federal motion from Cardi's legal team is only becoming more likely. And listen, I am just going to tell you right here, this filing is coming. It is just about finding the remaining puzzle pieces to it. And what we really can conclude from it just in terms of how this is all going to shape up and how it is going to end the absurd circus we are watching from all these defenders right now here. Well, you are not going to want to miss the next breakdown because there is going to be a massive payoff to all of this very soon. So go and check the suggested video.